Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel. I am currently in the Airbus widebody type rating for the A330, and in today's video featuring the TOLIS A340-600 I want to show you an unreliable speed indication scenario. So let's talk a little bit about the basics so that you will actually understand what's about to happen by the time we get flying. So first of all, we need to detect the unreliable speed, and to do that we need to somewhat understand what might cause one. Now, there are plenty of different causes, and there are plenty of different ways how it can show, but a common one would be a blockage of the pitot probe. Now, if the pitot probe is blocked, then obviously we are going to get incorrect indications on the airspeed indicator. However, we need to understand how those indications might look like. And an important part there is to understand how the speed is measured. Speed basically is dynamic pressure, so the pressure exercised from the airplane moving forward through the air. Now, we cannot measure only dynamic pressure, but we can only measure total pressure and static pressure. So for that reason, we are going to measure the total pressure using our pitot probes and the static pressure using our static ports. And in the construction of the speed indicator, to put it very simple, you measure the total pressure through the pitot probe, you subtract the pressure that you measure from the static port, and then you've got dynamic pressure, which basically is your airspeed. Now, we need to understand what's going to happen when we change altitude while our pitot probe is blocked. And obviously, it means that since the total pressure measured through the pitot probe is going to stay constant, but the static pressure changes since we increase our altitude, our speed indication is going to vary. And in climb, it usually means our speed indication is going to rapidly increase. Because, remember the formula, dynamic pressure equals total pressure minus static pressure. If static pressure gets less because we climb, that means the measured dynamic pressure becomes higher, thus our speed indication increases. Therefore, with an airspeed unreliable situation, it is to be expected that our speed indications are going to increase rapidly. However, that is just one possibility. It is the one that we are going to encounter today, but it is just one possibility out of many. Now, detecting this scenario that you run into is the most important aspect in surviving the encounter. Now, basically, if you survive the first 30 seconds in which you encounter such a scenario, then you will be rather safe. But those first 30 seconds are crucial, and therefore Airbus has established memory items for the unreliable speed indication procedure if the safe conduct of the flight is impacted. And those memory items are autopilot off, auto thrust off, flight director off, and then you set certain pitch and thrust values. And those, for the A340, are 12.5 degrees of pitch with your takeoff thrust, at the thrust reduction altitude and below level 100, 10 degrees of pitch with climb thrust, above the thrust reduction altitude and above flight level 100, 5 degrees pitch and climb thrust. Maintain your flap configuration if you are in either flaps 0, 1, 2 or 3, and select flap configuration 3 if you were in config full when the situation happened. Speed brakes check retracted, landing gear up. When at or above the MSA or circuit altitude, level off for troubleshooting. And that leveling off is rather important. We don't want to climb too far because the difference in the static pressure is just going to get further. So by the time we reach the MSA, we are just going to level the airplane off and then decide on what to do. Now, technically not in the memory items, but still very useful, you can look up the GPS altitude in the data page of your MCDU. So you go to data and then GPS monitor. Down there you got the GPS altitude, and your ground speed is also typically going to stay reliable. Not typically, it will stay reliable. So those two indications will be rather useful for flying your airplane. When the memory items are complete, we go into the unreliable speed indication QRH procedure, and in there you've got a lot of useful stuff like pitch and power tables. At this point, unfortunately, I only have those tables for the A330 and not for the A340 aircraft, so the pitch and power flying we have to do in this one will have to be a little bit of a guesstimate. But you get where this is going. Okay then, and from there on, we are going to be directed through different procedures, but I'm going to show you all of that in flight. Okay, so finally, here is how I have inserted the failure for you. And it's basically in the navigation tab, and then clock pilot pido, clock co-pilot pido, clock standby pido. And I chose slightly different speeds at which the failures are going to happen, because it means different total pressures will be stored in the pido probe, and therefore you're going to get slightly different indications. But that is the setup how I created this situation. Okay then. I would say we are pretty much ready to go. So let's release our brakes and take off. Man flag 69, SOS runway, auto thrust blue. Thrust set. 100 knots, checked. V1 rotates. Positive climb, gear up. Flight controls, ultimate law. Okay, here you can see it happen. The speed is running away, even though we are flying the pitch power that we should be flying. And that's our indication up here that we have an unreliable speed. Okay, so unreliable airspeed, memory items. 12.5 degrees pitch, takeoff thrust is set, auto thrust off. And I'm going to cancel the speed warning here. Okay. And now it's first fly the aircraft. We're at the acceleration altitude. So, climb thrust, 10 degrees of pitch. We'll climb to an altitude of 5,000 feet here. That's above the MSA. That's going to keep us safe. Now compare the ground speed. 186 versus 300 indicated. That's a clear indication that there is trouble with our airspeed indications. Okay then, I'm going to level off over here. I'll just have to guesstimate the pitch and power for that. In real life, the other pilot would have opened the QRH by now and searched for those tables. But you can see you can kind of fly the airplane just based upon the altitude and the ground speed indications up here. Do note that the wind indication is unreliable. Okay, so unreliable speed indications procedure. If the safe conduct of the flight is impacted, that is no longer the case, we are past that. Okay, when flight path is stabilized. Autopilot off. Off. Auto thrust off. Off. Flight directors off. Off. Speed brakes checked retracted. So, quick look down here, they are indeed retracted. We can also check it on here as well. And flight path, keep stabilized. Okay, so that's the most important thing now, keeping the airplane stabilized. I would say this looks about good. Okay, respect stall warning. We'll do that. Affected ADR identification. Probe and window heat on. So, probe window heat on. All speed indications cross-check. So, we've got like 325 on number 2, 330 on number 3, and 320 on number 1, versus a ground speed of 186. Okay, that's a clear indication there that all of them are not correct. So, if at least one ADR is confirmed reliable, no, that's not the case. If affected ADRs cannot be identified or all ADRs are affected, that's the case. When above flight level 250 or when below flight level 250, well, we are below level 250. If speed still unreliable, all ADR push buttons off. So, ADRs, ADR push buttons, 1, 2, 3, all off. And this gives us the backup speed scale and GPS altitude. Okay, speed, fly the green. Note, if the backup speed scale does not react to longitudinal stick input when flying the green area of the speed scale, the flight crew must disregard the backup speed scale and use pitch and thrust tables. So we are going to give this a quick test. I'm going to pitch up a little, and we expect to see the backup speed scale react, because this is basically an angle of attack indication. So, pitch up, you can see it react, pitch down, you can see it is reacting. So we know it works. Okay, ATC transponder, alt report off, because that may be unreliable. Off. Nav ADR 123 fault ECAM procedure, apply. Okay, so now initially we are just going to fly the airplane. And you can see we have GPS altitude, which is not necessarily correct versus barometric altitude, because GPS altitude is based on altitude above a standard Earth ellipsoid, which, however, the real Earth does not necessarily comply with. But it gives us somewhat of an indication. Also, as long as we remain our speed within the green range, basically our angle of attack in the green range, you will see that the airplane is going to fly quite well. My navigation is a bit all over the place right now, but that's not too much of a problem. Let's make a right-hand turn to a heading of 080, so that we slowly get into a downward vector. Also at this point, it is worth noting that our airplane is in alternate law right now. We can see that up here from those axes on the ADI. And it is quite important that we are in alternate law, because we are flying a protected airplane. And when your indications go haywire on a protected airplane, the thing might do stuff to you that you normally would not want to happen. Okay, so now we've got the nav ADR 123 fault ECAM procedure apply. I'm quickly going to finish the turn, and then we're going to apply the procedure. Okay, so nav ADR 123 fault. Speed, fly the green. That's what we're doing. Standby instruments may be unreliable. Keep in mind they're coming from ADR number 3, and we have identified them to be unreliable. Avoid icing conditions. We don't have a temperature probe anymore, but, well, we can see that we're clear. All ADR off procedure, apply. Okay, and that one we find in the QRH once again. So let's go ahead with the all ADR off procedure. Speed, fly the green. Doing that. PFD altitude, GPS. Yep, it is. TCAS and ATC reporting in-op. Cabin pressurization mode selector, manual. Now that is because the airplane can no longer control the pressure properly. Come on. Let's remove that. So you can see the cabin altitude is just going haywire there. Okay, so cabin pressure mode selector manual, cabin press mode selector manual. Manual vertical speed control as required. Target cabin pressure vertical speed. Climb at 500 feet a minute, descend at 300 feet a minute. Now we've got a table down there which basically shows us the cabin altitude targets for different altitudes, and we are below level 100, so cabin altitude target is 0. However, let's make our lives a little bit simpler, because it is quite a bit of work to manage the cabin altitude manually. So what we'll do is this. We're at 5,000 feet, and coincidentally, the cabin altitude happens to be there as well. So we are just going to open the outflow valve fully. And that means our cabin altitude will be under control at all times, because it will simply equal the airplane. Okay, now this is a bit of a thing that's gonna take a little while now. That takes like 40 seconds or so to open the outflow valve fully. But that is necessary, so we'll have to do that. In the meantime, where's our airplane turning? Come on, keep flying straight. Okay, that just takes a little bit of time right now to open the outflow valves. Also, the eagle-eyed among you will have spotted something by now. We took off with the packs off, and since we went right into an abnormal procedure, we totally forgot to turn the packs on again. So that's something to keep in mind there. That the pilot monitoring should take a moment to turn the packs on. Okay, so. Well, normally we would open the outflow valves fully, but I would say this should be sufficient for the cabin altitude to stay at the airplane altitude. Okay then, landing distance procedure apply. So now we would go into the Fly Smart app and calculate our landing performance, and we are going to have an increased landing run because our speed is not reliable, and that means we will probably be approaching a little bit faster than usual. Now our target approach speed is that little triangle up there, and we simply need to keep in mind that we need to fly that triangle, but nonetheless, we always run those calculations just to be sure that we can actually land. Now, the TOLUS unfortunately doesn't have any non-normal configurations here, but the important thing for us basically is that we can land on the length of the runway available, and well, we've got Munich, that runway is about 4 kilometers, so no problem at all landing on there. Okay. Then, for approach, speed, fly the green. For landing, use flaps 3. So let's go ahead and activate approach phase, flap 3. Approach speed, backup speed, target speed. That's that one that we're flying right now. When at flap 2, landing gear gravity extension down. When landing gear down locked, landing gear lever down, gear down indications check. Nose wheel steering not available, landing gear doors remain open. During final approach, manual vertical speed control full up. That's basically what we've done already. And before door opening, check delta pressure 0. And that's the end of the all ADR off procedure. So we're going to keep the all ADR off. We're going to keep the for approach stuff open, and the rest of that is basically done. Okay. So, let's do a very quick setup. We've got 1013, 18 degrees, and the wind is calm. Not that it would matter. Very important, do not enter a minimum. Because we are flying on GPS altitude, and that is different from barometric altitude. So for that reason, do not enter a minimum. And we are basically finished with the procedure on the ECAM as well, so clear nav. Clear nav. Status. Okay, stop ECAM. Then, what can we do? We can't do any resets. We can quickly check our non-normals. So the flaps are just going to stay where they are. We don't need any of those. That one's disarmed, and that is alright. Okay, cool. Then, system resets. We can't do any. And that's basically it. Okay, continue ECAM. Status. Speed instrument, standby instruments may be unreliable. Speed brake, do not use. Maximum speed 305 knots or Mach point H2. Alternate law, protections lost. In-op systems, ADR 1, 2, 3. Flight control protection. Autopilot 1 and 2. Auto thrust. Cut 2. GPWS. Remove starters. Remove starters. ECAM actions complete. Okay, so now we're going to start the preparation for the approach, and I am going to program an immediate return to Munich. So new destination, insert, arrival. We are going to do an ILS approach for runway 26 right. No star, no via. Insert. So direct to, radial in, 080. Thank you. Okay, flies. Alright, and that is our approach. We are receiving the items. Very good. Okay, approach phase is... Hey, I just entered that stuff. Okay. No minimum, very important, as the call would be spurious anyway. So what I would do, I would just write it down somewhere and clip that somewhere to my dashboard, and that's it. Okay. Let's select an auto brake as well, and that's basically it. Okay. So we are going to do a little bit longer final than usual, and I do want to fly an early stabilized approach. So let's go somewhere like 15 miles or so. So we'll just fly ahead for a little bit longer, and then we will turn final when the, or turn base when the DME reads 15 down there. Now let's talk a little bit about flying on the backup speed scale. So what's important on this is basically the following. The green range is where you are flying normal angle of attacks, because this basically is an angle of attack indicator right now. And the green range is the normal. The slow speed kind of speaks for itself, and the high speed is just where you are getting into those speed regions that you just don't need to fly. So the ground speed indication is always a good indicator over here. We're doing 175 knots ground speed right now with the flaps 2, and since we are flying downwind, we should have a little bit of a tailwind. So I would say that our actual airspeed is somewhere in the region of about 160 knots, or maybe 170 even. And that's totally fine for the flap setting and weight that we are flying. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our base turn. It's going to be a heading of 170. Now let's talk about how we can actually fly on the backup speed scale. Now, let's say that for whatever reason we didn't want to return to our departure airport. What we would do, in order to retract the flaps, and don't just do this prior to flying on the backup speed scale, basically you would bring the speed to the top of the green band, and then you would retract the flaps one step, and that would basically change your angle of attack to an AOA that is somewhere on the low side of the backup speed scale, and that would be sufficient to get your airplane to accelerate further into the middle of the speed scale, and that's fine. Now we are going to do the exact opposite thing for flap extension. So let's start slowing the airplane down right now. Let's quickly go over the checklist again. So for landing, use flap 3, and when at flap 2, we're going to do the landing gear gravity extension. So let's go ahead with that. Okay, landing gear gravity extension down. So landing gear gravity extension, confirmed. Let's take that up and remove the guards, if we can get them. Here they are. Okay, down. Come on, airplane. Okay, when landing gear downlocked, okay, now we can see it is downlocked. Landing gear lever down. Down. Let's turn to an intercept heading here. 210 maybe. Or 220 looks good. Okay, gear down indications check, and we have just checked them. So, nose wheel steering not available, landing gear doors remain open. And that is indeed what we see down there. It might give you an ECAM message on that, or it might not. Okay, during final approach, manual vertical speed control full up. And before opening the doors on the ground, check differential pressure 0. Now the latter part we just covered already by looking or by opening the outflow valves completely earlier. So with that, the checklist is basically done. So let's go ahead and extend flaps 3 now. I'm going to fly the airplane towards the bottom of the backup speed scale. Like so. Flaps 3. Okay, flaps are in 3. Now we can fly it right onto the approach speed target. And you can see, looking at the ground speed indication, that we're doing 155 knots. So that is perfectly fine. Localize our live. And we're on glide slope. Now in the unreliable airspeed tables, there would be pitch and power tables that we would be aiming for on the final approach. You don't necessarily need them if you've got the backup speed scale working. So that's something to keep in mind. However, they are very good targets. They are very good targets to use in order to control your... in order to just stabilize your approach a little bit. But as you can see in the 340, something around 50% N1 and 2.5, 3 degrees pitch normally works quite well. So we're flying along final now.
2,500.
Check. We're flying along final now because it helps us to stabilize the airplane right on the point where we want it to be. We're on the target of the backup speed scale. Right here. And now we're just going to fly it down like that. We'll have to stop it on the runway because nose wheel steering is not available due to the landing gear gravity extension. And that's it then. So, the way we are flying the airplane right now is basically how the military flies their fighter jets, based on the angle of attack with a certain angle of attack target. Okay, what is our speed doing there? Running away a little bit. And it is quite important indeed that you establish an early final on this one, because as you can see, some disruptions might happen, and it is quite important indeed that you are able to get the right feeling for your airplane and how the backup speed scale behaves and stuff like that before you actually come in for landing. Remember, there is no land ASAP shown on the ECAM, So you got time. Basically, once the first 30 seconds of the maneuver are over, if you're still alive at that point, chances are that you are going to make it through the entire thing. Right, nicely established on the final.
500. 400. 300. 200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 10, 5.
Okay, spoilers, reverse green, decel. Manual brakes. And as mentioned, we need to stop it on the runway. So last thing now, before we're gonna open any door, let's have a look at the bleed page. Make sure the differential pressure is 0. Now there are also some indicators on the doors of the A340 and A330. Basically all Airbuses, I believe. Not so sure about the small ones. There are also some differential pressure indicators there, in case they try to open the doors and there still is the differential pressure, they're going to get a red light. However, if we can avoid that in first place, that is certainly going to make everything easier. Alright, and that's it. The unreliable airspeed situation in the A330, A340. I do hope that you enjoyed this one, and if you did, then do let me know in the comments below. Again, my hand flying wasn't that perfect today, but that was mostly because I had to do stuff of the PF and the PM at the same time. However, that's going to do for the video anyway. Rest assured, if you are hand flying in a situation like this, then don't expect things to be as perfect as you can normally do it, because you will simply be distracted a bit. Of course, with a two-man crew, if you have a division between pilot flying and pilot monitoring, that's going to make your life easier. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this. Do let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, be so kind to leave a like for the video in YouTube as well, as it really helps out the algorithms. Finally, if you're up for more, subscribe to the channel. But for now, I would like to say thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one. Finally, if you really love my videos, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you again very soon.